We now have confirmation that the Barbie film is indeed feminist, and we got that revelation in an interview that Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie did, where they attempted to explain just how feminist the film really is. They did an interview with ABC News host Sarah Ferguson, who asked them, in the little that was able to be understood about the film in advance, clearly Mattel still talk about it in slightly different terms than you two do, but somehow they don't like to call it a feminist film. The actors seem very comfortable talking about it as a feminist film, but somehow it doesn't matter that you talk about it differently. Gerwig answered, well, it most certainly is a feminist film. When asked to explain how so, Robbie interjected and said, to me, that's like one slice of the pie. Gerwig then said, super big slice. Robbie continued, it's a big slice, but I also wouldn't call it a funny film because that discredits the fact that it's got a lot of heart and it's got a lot of emotion and it's got a lot of movie references, all this kind of stuff. I think Robbie right there is clearly realizes that the feminism word is a bad word to try and promote the film. I think she realized how she absolutely failed at doing that with Birds of Prey. She's trying to now not promote it that way. If you've watched any of her other interviews, she's kind of like punted on this question or had a similar response like this, where she's kind of deflects from it and tries to avoid actually talking about what exactly that the film is. And I think that's what she's doing here right now. Because it seems like Greta Gerwig is not prepared. Maybe she doesn't realize what can happen to the film. I think Margot Robbie might have more on the line, given the fact that she's the producer of the film through her Lucky Chap company. But anyways, she goes on and says, I'm like, it is funny. That is a huge part of it. It is a comedy, but if you just call it a funny film, it almost makes it sound like it doesn't have a lot going on, and it does. Then Gerwig shared, when we talk about this stuff, it almost sounds silly because you start talking about Barbie and Ken, and then you're having very serious discussion about Barbie and Ken, but it's also a humanist film because it's like the humanity, insofar as you can tell it of like Barbie and Ken, is what's paramount in the film. And at the beginning of the movie, Ken is a person with no status in this world. So in this kind of reversed world, that person who has no status is in a completely untenable place long term. Ferguson then asserts that Ken is taken from being a cipher into a real thing, real character. Gerwig responds, right, which is, but in that way, it's giving him humanity, as it were, as a doll, as whatever these kind of knots on knots that we have of the world of Barbie. I also think I will say just the existence of this film in the way it does is pretty incredible and is pretty, when I think of it, this sort of as it stands is amazing that this movie is made, and it's made the way it is with Margot as a producer and a star, and what the story is of the movie. It sort of feels unbelievable that it's been made. So we've heard this talking point before. That's a huge word salad, basically saying like, that's been one of the big talking points that they have, though, but she has a giant word salad there to getting to it. And it's basically like, I can't believe Mattel let us make this film about their Barbie movie. And just how they're trying to market it off on like, ooh, we got away with something sneaky and we want to let you in on what we got away with kind of thing. And I do think that's working. I think that is a good ploy that does seem to be working. It seems to be there are people that seem to be interested in it. And I think that has one of the main reasons for it. They want to know what's so naughty about this film that the people at Mattel didn't want you to actually make this. She then asserts it's feminist in a way that includes everyone. It's a rising tide lifts all boats version of it. I don't know any version of feminism that is a rising tide that lifts all boats version of it. I don't think that exists. And if you are claiming that it exists, you are lying. But nevertheless, Robbie then says, I think some people hear the word feminism means that doesn't mean men. So see, here we go. This is what I was getting to earlier. Margot Robbie does know what people think of this word because that's what it actually means. It means deriding men in our current year of 2023. Excluding them, deriding them, putting them down, subjugating them. That's what it means in this world now. And I think Robbie knows that if you try and market a film like that, people stay away from it. And she saw that with Birds of Prey, which she also produced. Gerwig interjects and says, it does mean men. And then Robbie continued and said, anyone who believes men and women should be equal is, Gerwig finished her sentence, feminist. It's that simple. Well, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. That's why we're at the state we are. Men and women are not equal. They are very different. They are very different from each other. They like men are much stronger. Usually they have higher bone density. We're learning all about this now, or we're learning much more about it because of what's going on in the world. But there's very big differences between men and women. Now, as far as like them being equal, maybe in like the workplace or something like that, sure. But there are still very, like, we still are naturally attuned to gender roles. That's not to say there aren't exceptions, but for the most part, you usually still do see a lot of men being the breadwinners, women staying at home with the kids, because that's how we were built. That's how we were made. That's how God made us. But again, there are exceptions. She goes on and says, but I think some people hear the word feminist and associate a lot of negative baggage with the word. Yes, of course, because there's a lot of negative baggage with it. Ferguson then presses, so what is it for you in the film if you guys are comfortable? If the actors, if all the people on set are comfortable, they get that the word belongs to the film. How so? That word being feminism. So Gerwig says, I think it belongs to the film because when we were making it, the whole Barbie is like an icon that, as Margot is speaking to, she exists in the both and, not the either or. I have no idea what that means. Like, if you know what that means, please let me know in the comments. I have no idea what that means. She's not either good or bad, or, you know, I don't know what that means either. Diving into the complexity of it and not running away from it, but looking at all the thorniness and stepping into it, and also looking at all the thorniness and stepping into what is the negotiation of what women need to be and how to give them something other than a tightrope to walk on is how it feels feminist to me. So this definitely feels like we're going to get some like oppression narrative right there. You're stuck on a tightrope and you got to walk this certain path and you got to do it this way, or otherwise, like, you're not a real woman or something like that. If you do it this other way, you're like an outcast, or like you're like, again, you get like an oppression narrative or a victim narrative, whichever way you want to call it. So Robbie then shared her answer. She says, I actually, when I got asked the other day, like, if Barbie is a feminist, well, she's actually the level up from that. If you look at Barbie Land at the beginning, the Barbies are on top and Kens are kind of disregarded. So I was like, well, that's not equal. So whatever the opposite of misogynist is, actually Barbie's like, so towards the end, when they balance things out, then it might be feminist, but actually it's beyond feminist because the power dynamic is in the favor of the Barbies to begin with. Gerwig then adds, but then, not to give too much away, but the human character of, I will say, Gloria, played by the brilliant America Ferrera, also articulates some stuff about what this negotiation is. So I just want to say, I think that this is just me having a sneaking suspicion, but I think that Gloria character is clearly based off like Gloria Steinem, the huge feminist from the 60s. And 70s. It's just too on the nose for me. That's what I think. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think that's how these Hollywood people think. Then she concludes saying, and I think really what it feels is like allowing all the things to exist at once and not shoving things down when they don't fit with something. So this is literally the transgender ideology. You can be anything that you want. You can change your sex from male to female. You can change your sex from female to male. This is that kind of ideology that she's basically projecting here. It is absolutely evil and heinous. It should be rejected because it destroys people. It is destroying people. We're seeing it around us today, how it's destroying people. And they're trying to suppress those stories about people, about their lives being destroyed. And it's not just the individuals that are basically being duped by this ideology, but it's the people around them, their family members, their friends that are also being affected by this. Because this stuff it's not a private thing. This stuff does affect the people around you. And then clearly we're seeing it affect society at large. Bud Light certainly seeing those effects, right? But that is how they try to explain how this film is feminist. I don't know if they did a good job on it. I feel like a lot of it was very word salady. You got to really kind of dig to find out what they're actually trying to say. So, but they did confirm that it is feminist, and I think this was pretty much what they were saying the entire time. They just did a really good job of hiding it in the early lead up to this film's release. And I think Margot Robbie, to her credit, has done a really good job of kind of avoiding a lot of this question as well, and pivoting away from it. It looks like they just got caught right here in this ABC News interview, because a lot of the other ones, they were asked similar questions and they just didn't avoid it as well as this one. And maybe that's because Gerwig was with her, and Gerwig definitely did not seem very prepared to answer questions like this.